Anyway, hang tight. Here we go. Hey, folks, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. Welcome to Cut the Crap. I know, weird name for a program, crap. It's just merely an acronym for culture, race, and American politics. Listen, I'm kind of calling this part two, right? I'm kind of calling this part two. I did a program talking about, can this really be child trafficking? Is it really what it is? Is it really as bad as they say? I also used it to introduce you to the movie that's a big hit, which is called The Sound of Freedom. The movie's been plagued with issues all around the country where either fire alarms have been pulled or conveniently the air went out in that particular theater only. They had to stop it. Or some weird smells were being blown in the theater. They thought something was wrong and they had to evacuate it. But it seems to only be happening in the actual screens at the time of this film, Sound of Music. Excuse me, Sound of Music. Yeah, right. Sound of Freedom. And it was because I believe the cabal doesn't want this known. Now, I know a little bit more in the background and stuff. I've known Tim Ballard for a long time. I was introduced to him about 10 years ago, and I understood his operation and planning and logistics and what needed to be done and what he was doing, a man on a mission. I find it interesting that, and it's the same phenomenon with like Donald J. Trump or anybody, when somebody comes out finally exposing the truth, the system unleashes holy hell on them to try to destroy it. But see, you've probably recognized the system by now. And here's how it works. People in the media will start attacking things. That's why they're saying on this, Sound of Freedom, that it's a QAnon supporting movie, right? That's why they say that. And that's why the media won't really write the stories that need to be written about, like in Kenya, where children have sex with the tourists for $1. Once the media attacks it, they try to destroy the credibility. Then what they do is they get their operatives, and the way the operatives do this, people that you think are on your side, people that hold themselves up as Christians, people that say they're conservatives, and instead of dealing with child trafficking, they'll try to make you look somewhere else, like, oh, they're making money on it. Oh, I wonder how many donations they got. Oh, this is just about donations. And this is the sad, sad state of affairs that goes on in our media. Now, my other program, I played this. I'm going to play it for you again just to set this one up. Here is how. 10 years ago, CBS said this was an incredible thing. Here's CNN today bashing this movie, trying to get you not to watch it, distracting you.
This movie battling Indiana Jones for the top spot at the box office, and it stars a QAnon promoter. The Sound of Freedom is based on the life of the real-life former Homeland Security agent who staged sting operations to catch child sex traffickers. But the film and its star are raising eyebrows among critics. Some say that it bends the truth about child exploitation, and it caters to QAnon conspiracy theorists. Its distributor, Angel Studios, denies those accusations. Jim Caviezel, the star of the film, is also known for openly embracing QAnon theories. For more on this, I want to bring in, and you seem pretty familiar with him because he doesn't really hide his association with this real wild plot that involves, drinking the blood of children and things like that.
No, he doesn't hide it at all. And you have a lot of people who are in this world of QAnon who say, oh, they don't know what that is. They've never heard of it. They're just asking questions. With somebody like Jim Caviezel, he is openly embracing it. He's openly using its catchphrases and its concepts. He's speaking at QAnon conventions. And this film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon, but claim they don't know what it is.
And The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of sex trafficking. But that theme, it's sort of like that kernel of truth that feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory. Tell us how those two things work together.
Sure. And the most durable and the most believable conspiracy theories are not entirely false. There's something in them that is true, and the rest of it is false. But the believers point to the one true thing, and they say, oh, you don't believe that this particular thing is true. In terms of child trafficking, we know trafficking is real. We know it has real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites, and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down. So there's a very participatory element. You're not just going to see a movie, you're just killing 2 hours on a hot day. You are helping bring down these pedophile rings and save children. Now, it's not true, but it's a very comforting and it's a very warm feeling to have.
These child trafficking organizations don't just fall on their own because it's a highly profitable criminal enterprise. And the only way you fight it, and that was supposed journalist Michael Rothschild, right? And CNN, you could see her grimacing, and it's about child drinking blood. You could see her grimacing. Read that. Somebody, remember, those news people read scripts. Somebody put that on there for her to read. But I find it very interesting. Something as dastardly as child trafficking, child sex trafficking, that they decided to try to make it out of about conservatives or what conservatives believe. They couldn't even acknowledge that Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus and Passion of the Christ, a movie Hollywood didn't want to make. And we'll address that in the next segment. But one of the most successful movies in the world, and unlike other movies, that movie will be a regular watch go-to every Easter. Every Easter. That's how much impact it has. People will watch, rewatch, and rewatch. It was a phenomenal movie. But now the mainstream media only does what they're told. The very first thing you should think about, instead of the idiots saying, they're red shoes. Oh, look over here. Who's funding it? When the mainstream media is telling you not to watch, then you should be watching. When the mainstream media says, oh, it's a bad, horrible movie, and it's a made-up thing about child grooming, you should be watching. You should be doing the opposite of what mainstream media does. But some people are so narrow in their thought and set in their ways, they can't see they're being manipulated. And then it takes good people, mothers, fathers, even grandfathers and grandmothers, and it turns them into agents for destruction because they're sharing crap. Because they've been used by a system that uses their brain and turns them into something bad. This is what we're covering in today's program. We're talking about the Sound of Freedom. This is part 2 of my program. There's so much to unpack. We're going to get into the nasty, horrible facts. Be right back. Okay, I'm in my break. I zoom forward. Don't worry. Here we go. Okay. Okay, folks, we're back. Cut the crap. This crap we're talking about is not really culture, race, and American politics. Well, it is culture, race, and American pedophiles. I get livid about this topic because my precious sister, my oldest sister, was taken in the 3rd grade at 8 years old. It was horrible. We did get her back. We didn't lose her. Many of these kids are killed. We got her back when she was 16 years old. But it was a 16 years old that was very wise to the ways of the world and over-sexualized. It was absolutely horrible. Now, as an adult later in life, she's had to have multiple operations to try to save her from scarring on her insides. Private parts, yeah, scarring. The second one will be even harder than the first one. Now, this topic is the only topic of years of being on Twitter with a very large audience that I got banned on Twitter. When I did a 2-hour special on child trafficking before the elections, way back before, President Trump even came into office. I did an expose on it with the teams that actually go in and save these kids and how it works. And that's what Twitter at the time terminated my account for. Terminated my account for exposing it and showing it. That way back when kind of let me know, wow, somebody's sitting at the top of this pyramid and they're really trying to make sure people don't see this film. One of the things that's going on in this film is people are actually paying it forward. Here's the producer of the movie.
I will donate all of the chat revenue to the Spear. Is that the
Spear Fund?
The Spear Fund, the best way to put it.
Podcast.
And I'll put
Producing
10,000
film.
towards the pay it forward for the film.
And the producer.
Thank you so much.
When we're wrapping up,
Thank you.
easy for me to do. Easy for me to say. It's not that I don't like. We can do it. We're going to do it.
Let me tell you why this is so important. There's a lot of families that are listening to interviews that they have 4 children, five children. They cannot afford to bring everyone to the experience because Sound of Freedom is a cinematic experience, right? That you cannot see that on TV or on social media. Film is different. Film changed your life, right? So because of your generosity, thousands of people will go and see the film for free. And we're saving lives right there. And the movement is growing. And more people in media are talking about the success of the film. So you put pressure. We're going to show the movie on the 25th, brother, on the Capitol Hill. Can you imagine that? That's powerful because you're going to have Congress from both sides, Republicans and Democrats, right? They're going to see the film and then a panel with Jim, Tim, and myself. Can you imagine moving the hearts of the most important decision makers in the world who are living here in Washington, D.C.? This is a huge opportunity. You know, the only reason why they're doing that? The only reason why they're doing that is because of the success of the film. I mean, we can change the world if more people see this film. We're competing with Mission Impossible right now. And you know what? As much as I like Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible, that movie won't save lives. Sound of Freedom is changing the culture, is saving lives, and it's inspiring so many people to become ambassadors of freedom. So thank you for your generosity, and I hope a lot of people that are listening to this interview, this podcast, they go right now when this interview finished to angel.com/freedom, angel.com/freedom, and pay it forward. So somebody else can see the movie for free because of your generosity.
I should have said this at the start of the show, but I will elaborate too. So the way it works, we have this meter here on YouTube that shows us the total amount of super chats that came in during the show. What happens is YouTube takes 35%, we get the rest. Forget the 35%. The total number that's there, I'm going to donate to your organization, and then 10,000 towards the pay it forward for people to be able to watch this movie, to be able to go see it if they can. And so now everyone's dumping in the super chats, and that was the intended position. So basically, I'll cover that 35% cut that YouTube takes to make sure the full amount of the chat revenue goes to your organization. We're currently at $3,600.
Tim's broadcast ended up raising over $50,000 to this effort. There's going to be an event on the 19th with President Trump that is going to be doing the same panel and release of the movie. You can look that up online. And then you've got this event on Capitol Hill. It will be very easy to spot who the rat bastards are by who doesn't bother to show up. You know, this is all games. When we were doing the audit in Arizona, it was designed, I designed everything to be a bipartisan audit, Dems and Republicans, because election integrity is key for everybody. The Democrats in Arizona forbid any Democrats, anybody with the party, to participate in the audit. And they put out calls and memos and said, if you dare help in that audit, we will revoke your party membership and blackball you. Now, I thought that was really weird. And I thought it was because they're not for election integrity, which they're not, but hang with me. The reason they did that is because they couldn't have any Democrats in the audience seeing what was real, where they could see the results, and they couldn't have any Democratic lawmakers participating in it so they could see what was real. But what they really needed was a weapon for the media, because if you go back and look at all the articles, all of the news stories, what did they call the audit? They called the audit a partisan effort. You get it? A partisan effort. And that way they can say, they're just trying to pull a con on you. See, it was only conservatives. It was only Republicans. And see, they're Qers and they're this. And look at that. They wouldn't let Democrats participate. And it's just partisan. And they're hiding it. And this is how they're hiding it. So you can't see it because they only let their kind in. This is how this horrible game is fought. And this thing on child trafficking is no different. It is no different. They do this, and how they talk about it and what they say about it in the media is all 100% to screw with your head. Because it's a psychological operation. They do not want you waking up. They don't want to stop the gravy train. They don't want to stop the money earning because they actually enable it because it could be stopped. We're talking about the sound of freedom. And if we want freedom, you've got to know the truth. Hang tight, folks. I'll be back right after this. Okay, here we go. Ready? Stand by. Welcome back, folks. We're talking about the sound of freedom. You think you're free. You're not free. The media, the government, everything literally labels you. I was just talking about how, in Arizona, they would not let any Democrats participate because they needed to be able to say this was a partisan effort, that it was only a partisan play, that they're hiding stuff, they're doing stuff and whatever. I'm going to remind you what this battle is about before I get to Tim Ballard and others. But I'm going to remind you 10 years ago, when it wasn't a big thing and it was struggling and only a few of us talked about it or helped out with these missions to get them done to save kids, the media really didn't care about it. But now, because of 2020, you really see how bad our government is. You really see there is evil out there and your eyes are open. They're trying to get you away from it. But let's go back about 10 years ago. Here's CBS on the work of Tim Ballard.
Last weekend, police broke up a major sex trafficking ring in Colombia, which has become a destination for tourists looking for sex with boys and girls. The police had help from an American who went undercover to rescue the children, and Elaine Quijano met him.
Tim Ballard has one mission: to track down child traffickers. 4 months ago, Colombian authorities asked him to investigate a tip that children were being sold there as sex slaves.
Within a half hour, this individual walks up to me, starts asking me what I'm here for, what I want, and within minutes, he says, well, I've got kids as young as 11 years old.
Ballard, a former Homeland Security agent, now heads up Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit group that rescues trafficked kids. After that first meeting, the Colombians asked him to put together a sting.
No men will be in here, only women.
Operation Underground Railroad spent months planning, renting this house, rigging it with hidden cameras to document the crime, coordinating with Colombian authorities, and negotiating with the traffickers.
How they find these kids is they lure them in by pretending to have a modeling agency. They target them at 9 or 10 years old. And they were telling us that by 11, they're ready for sex. They're ready to be sold.
What is that like, looking into that kind of person's eyes?
It's horrifying, and this is why. Because I've got to smile in the face of evil. This is the table where we're going to do the negotiation.
Less than 24 hours after the operatives landed, the suspected traffickers arrived on the island, and the final deal with the undercover team began. 54 boys and girls aged 11 to 18 were ushered in for what had been billed as a sex party. They were given candy and drinks and told to wait in this small room.
This little 11-year-old boy, I remember, he asked one of my operatives if they could give him some cocaine or something. He said, they usually give me something because I'm really scared.
By the time the deal was done, the alleged traffickers were set to make $25,000. That transaction was never completed. 25 Colombian special operatives stormed the party, arresting 5 suspects, 4 men and 1 former beauty queen, all charged with child trafficking. The victims, 29 of whom are under 18, were evacuated, given medical exams, and placed in a rehabilitation center where specialists are working to undo the damage.
Right before I got in the boat, we had to walk by this room where the kids were, and they put their hand up. And I touched their hand and see that there's liberation now.
Liberating one child at a time. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, New York.
It's going to be interesting that when this is played at Capitol Hill for Democrats and Republicans of all houses, who's going to show up? Now, Tim has testified before. Let me share that with you.
These children, the real children, have nobody. I know. I've seen them. I've seen dozens of them. They have nobody. The only adults in their lives want to sell them, traffic them, and rape them. And so we must run to them. We must be their parents. If not us, who? If not this esteemed committee with the power and authority to rescue lives, if not you, then I ask, who? Operation Underground Railroad has rescued over 2,000 victims and assisted in the arrest of over 1,000 traffickers and pedophiles. Much of my work has been based on simple economics. The United States is one of the highest, if not the highest, consumers of child pornography in the world. We are the demand for child sex. As such, traffickers around the world seek to bring children to the United States where they can sell them for sex and make a lot of money. My number one personal and professional goal has been to keep these children out of the hands of these sick American pedophiles. I want to share one case in which we failed to do this. The victim was a foreign-born child around 12 years old, who we will call Lily. Lily was kidnapped south of the border. She was then taken along with several other children her age and smuggled into the United States, not through a port of entry, but rather through a part of the southern border without significant barriers or a wall. Lily's traffickers easily transported her to New York City, where she was raped between 30 and 40 times a day, and this is not atypical at all for a case like this. She believes that she alone was raped over 20,000 times between the age of 13 and 17 right here in our country. She eventually escaped, and my foundation is now caring for her as she prepares to testify in federal court against her captors. In accordance with U.S. laws, Lily, as a survivor of sex trafficking, she has been granted legal status, and we're helping her to complete the process of becoming a U.S. citizen. The U.S. Attorney's Office has requested that we not publicly share any more details about this case, as it's going to trial later this year. Recounting her experience, and this is key, Lily has often asked me a simple yet powerful question. Why was there no wall or barrier on the southern border for me? A barrier would have saved me. What is she talking about? It's pretty simple what she's talking about. I've been quite surprised of late to see politicians and others who are opposed to building barriers and walls hail the successes of drug seizures and rescues at ports of entry and using those successes to say, see, we don't need walls or barriers, we have ports of entry. The bad guys come through ports of entry. In fact, we don't have ports of entry without walls. The walls are the thing that compelled Buchanan to take that child into the port of entry in the first place. From his vantage point on the night of July 3rd, 2006, with this poor slave child captive in his van, he only had one choice. the port of entry. And that was thanks to the border wall that existed where he happened to be working his evil works. Currently, with hundreds of miles of border, too many traffickers have a choice. Sadly, we as a nation are providing them that choice. In the end, the boy was liberated and Buchanan was locked up. In Lily's case, the traffickers were liberated and she was locked up and raped thousands of times in New York City. The difference? The boy had a barrier to save him. Lily did not. Paola Felix is a former Mexican congresswoman and current senior Mexican administration official working on anti-trafficking policies for Mexican President Manuel López Obrador. I work very closely with Paola to find children in Mexico who are en route to being smuggled into the United States. Responding to the debate over border barriers, Felix declared, quote, "It is very disappointing to me that people in the United States would ignore or downplay the many Hispanic children being smuggled into the United States outside of legal ports of entry and forced into the hell of sex slavery. Mexican authorities have uncovered at least 19 different land-based smuggling routes where victims are taken and trafficked for sex in the United States. Downplaying the crisis discourages U.S. officials from employing every tactic available to rescue them during the small window of time that they can. That is, while they are being crossed into the United States. After that, they are gone, maybe forever," end quote. As I conclude my remarks, please join me in a mental exercise that I employ often to ground me and focus me. I imagine that one of my own children is in the place of one of these child victims. I have 9 children, including 2 that my wife and I recently adopted from Haiti after having liberated them from traffickers, so it's something easier for me to do, and I know it's a difficult thing to do, but please, just for a moment, please imagine that one of your children, your grandchildren, nieces, nephews, dear friends has been kidnapped and is currently in Mexico being transported north with an evil scheme to smuggle them into the United States and force them into these black markets that we are discussing. We don't know exactly how the traffickers plan to get your child in this hypothetical. That's up to them and only known by them. But I think it's important to remember the stats that we heard earlier today, that upwards of 90% of the children, including the unaccompanied minors, are coming around the ports of entry in barrier-less parts of the border. But in this hypothetical, they're coming in. We don't know where, but they are coming. And in this hypothetical, before you sits a button that, if pushed, instantly creates a large and powerful barrier along the entire southern border. Now picture the hundreds of miles of border that exist, and picture those ports of entry with hundreds of agents, trained, equipped, looking for your child, trained to look for your child, who hopefully is coming through. And so now the question, do you push the button? If the answer is yes to that, then it's very clear what needs to be done next in our country. These children, the real children, have nobody. I know, I've seen them. I've seen dozens of them. They have nobody. The only adults in their lives want to sell them, traffic them, and rape them. And so we must run to them. We must be their parents. If not us, who? If not this esteemed committee with the power and authority to rescue lives, if not you, then I ask, who?
I always ask you, when all of this is going on, and you sit back and wait for Q or the Army or Space Force, you're falling for a plan that's designed to make you sit on the sidelines. They do it on purpose because it's psychological warfare. They need you to stand down. I want you to think about that border wall. And the left and the deep state says, oh, we've got to keep it open. These people are refugees. They're seeking refuge, and America's the great hope and all this other stuff. And it's against America if you do that. Did you ever realize that that border wall means more? Here's what it means more. It means more because that wall doesn't just stop illegals. It stops drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking for organ donation and stuff. You have to understand this. They use that human, we have to have mercy on these people. We have 85,000 children that have come across our border with this maladministration that have disappeared in the system. Nobody knows where they are. That wall stands for so much more. You don't realize it until you really understand everything that comes across that border and why they want it open. And folks, it's all about money and votes. Only voting can fix it, getting these rat bastards out of power. But it's money and it's votes. And that's why we must activate and understand this stuff. If not you, who? Hang tight. I'll be right back right after this. You would think people, and as I continue with my program, you think people would inherently know this, but they don't, right? Let's get back. Okay, folks, welcome back to Cut the Crap. I was just talking about the border. Sidecar driver in Rumble reminded me of something very important. I see your comments when you're following along with the program. By saying it's an invasion by military-age men who would have believed we could be invaded so easy. That's it. You've got to think about this wall at our southern borders. You have to understand the ramification of the wall. You have to understand 80+ thousand children have gone missing. And it's not just about forced labor. And it's not even always just about sex slaves, sex trade. It's organ harvesting. It's the most wicked stuff you could ever imagine is going on, and it comes right across our border. These are military-age men predominantly. They grab a child, they snag a child somewhere out in the third world countries, and they drag the child along, grooming them, training them, raping them. And it's their ticket in America. It's get in free in Biden's America if you have a child in tow. Why? Because then that child is sent to God knows where from that person who's not really their parent, and the administration lets it go. They get a child trafficker for free. You've got to accept and understand what this is. It all goes down, a lot of this, to the child sex trade. It's called child sex tourism. It is here in our borders. They are taking up hotels that are loaded with these children for sex trade. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry that in any given year has 2 million children in its grasp, making children perform as prostitutes because they've been abducted into sexual slavery. Some of these countries, it's totally legal. This sex trade pops up in countries that are closely linked to poverty, armed conflicts, rapid industrialization, and exploding population growth. Latin America, Southeast Asia, street children all the time turn to prostitution. And it's not just third world countries. It's South Africa. It's the United States, Thailand, Cambodia, India, Brazil, Mexico. These are the hot spots for this. The child victims, we now know, can go down to toddlers. And yeah, in our freaking schools, we're teaching how to have anal sex at elementary level. Are you kidding me? That's part of this grooming problem. Most of the kids that they consider in their prime are the ages of 6 to 11 years old. Right? 6 to 11 years old. This is a huge industry. Huge industry. 79% of all human trafficking, by the way, because human trafficking, they do it over in the Middle East, and will have indentured servants. But 79% of the total human trafficking is for sex trafficking. There's a big underground market for this. They'll take these kids, they'll put them in rape rooms. The FBI knows this. They say at any given time, there are 750,000 predators online visiting 40,000 chat rape rooms with webcams, paying fees to be able to watch children being raped on camera. But yet the media is going to tell you this is all false. Don't look at it. It's all bogus. I came across a story that's pretty disturbing. And it's out of Uganda, right? Or Kenya, right? And they say that desperate children will have sex with tourists for $1. Dainani, Kenya. This is an interview with a girl named Fatima, and she doesn't even bat an eye about what she's been doing since she dropped out of school 4 years ago. And she just says, I do sex, and giggles. I find them at the market. I find them at concerts. I find them at weddings. I find them on the beach. Most girls in my village do it. I can get 100 to 500 shillings. By the way, 100's $1. Sometimes a tourist will give me $10 for sex. And they catch the tourist on this beach, Dani, white pearl sand, water's clear turquoise. And while you're there, have sex with a child for $1. Top ones are Thailand, Philippines, Dominican Republic, and Brazil. It's a big business. And by the way, in these poor nations, in the villages, it's accepted, socially accepted, and it's encouraged. 1 out of every 3 girls in Kenya, by the time of 12 years old, 1 out of every 3 girls in Kenya, by the time they're 12, engages in regular, casual sex for money. And what's going on is if you can keep families in poverty, you can make inflation go through the roof, and you have selected governments instead of elected governments. This is what you get. And even parents, it happened in the Great Depression, folks, in the United States. Even parents will sell their children so they can contribute to the needs of the home. A Rolling Stone reporter wrote about this. He mocked everybody, saying it's QAnon crap. These are QAnon wackos. Rolling Stone said we're all wackos for being against this. It's a joke. It's not real. Folks, this is very real. And if you don't stand up, show up, and shout out, these rat bastards are going to keep doing it. It's up to us. And we have to tell the system fully, top to bottom, you've got to cut the crap. I'm done with my second radio show. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Dollar Donkey, or whatever his name was, didn't want to come on. I would have been interesting to have that Dragon's Breath or Dragon Hill, whatever his name